There was a time when owning a Porsche meant understanding a Porsche. A socket set, a service manual, and a Saturday afternoon were enough to handle most of what went wrong. That era is over. Today, the badge on the hood opens a machine that refuses to be touched without a password. These are the reasons fixing your own Porsche has crossed the line from difficult to impossible. Number 15. The diagnostic system is no longer a scanner, it is a subscription. Porsche service centers run a proprietary platform called PIWIS, currently in its third generation. This is not a hobbyist tool. A genuine dealer-grade PIWIS 3 interface with the Porsche licensed software and the tablet hardware the technicians use carries a premium price tag that climbs into the thousands of dollars before you ever connect it to a vehicle. And that is before the subscription. The software license renews annually, and without an active subscription, the diagnostic unit loses access to the online authorization servers it depends on for core functions. Independent Porsche specialists have reported yearly software renewal fees running into five-figure territory for the complete dealer-level package, and the cost keeps climbing with every model year Porsche releases. Compare that to the generic OBD2 reader sitting on the shelf at your local auto parts store for under €100. That reader can pull a basic fault code from the engine control unit. It cannot touch the dozens of proprietary Porsche subsystems buried beneath the surface. It cannot perform service resets on a modern Macan. It cannot code a replacement suspension module on a Cayenne. It cannot even clear certain stored faults without an authorized session. The gap between what the owner owns and what the dealer owns has never been more expensive to cross. Clone PIWIS units circulate on the grey market at a fraction of the official price, but using one on a connected Porsche risks being flagged by the manufacturer's online authentication, and a flagged VIN can be blacklisted from future authorized service. And diagnostics is only the first wall. Number 14. Your Porsche is not one computer. It is a network of them. A current generation Porsche can contain dozens of individual electronic control units, also called ECUs. Each unit manages a specific domain of the vehicle. There is a unit for the engine, another for the dual-clutch transmission, separate modules for the adaptive air suspension, the active stabilizer bars, the electric power steering, the infotainment, the driver assistance suite, and on premium trims, even the active aerodynamics. Each of these controllers communicates with the others through high-speed data buses. When the data stops lining up, the vehicle stops behaving rationally. Technicians who work on modern Porsches describe cascading fault patterns that would be unthinkable on older mechanical cars. A single sensor can drift slightly out of specification and feed a misleading reading to one controller. That controller then transmits bad data to a second controller, which can trigger a warning light on a third system that is not even physically connected to the original problem. A generic scanner might see a fault code from one module, while the rest of the network stays invisible. The remaining modules can only be interrogated with authorized diagnostic software, and without that full picture, any repair attempt is effectively guesswork against a vehicle that has been designed to resist it. This is the architectural reason home repair has become so difficult. It is about to get much worse. Number 13. You cannot just bolt on a replacement part and drive away. On a modern Porsche, a replacement control unit pulled from a parts car at a junkyard is effectively scrap metal until it is digitally married to your specific vehicle. The unit must be programmed with your vehicle identification number, paired with the immobilizer security system, and synchronized with the surrounding modules through an authenticated coding session. Without that handshake, the car does not accept the part. The engine will not start. The transmission stays locked. The suspension defaults to a fault state. The component is mechanically perfect and electronically invisible. This applies to far more than just the engine control unit. airbag modules, instrument clusters, gateway controllers, and even some comfort modules on the latest Cayenne and Panamera platforms all require authorized coding through Paywalled before the vehicle will recognize them as legitimate hardware. A specialist with cloning equipment can sometimes transfer the data from your original module onto a donor unit, but that is a niche service offered by a small number of shops, and the cost frequently rivals a factory replacement. The used parts market that once kept older vehicles on the road at reasonable cost has effectively been closed off for modern Porsches, because the digital lock makes the scrapyard inventory almost worthless for anything newer than roughly a decade old. A €40 sensor has become a three-figure repair because of a software lock. Porsche added a second brain that polices the first one. Modern Porsche powertrains no longer rely on the engine control unit alone. A separate supervisory controller sits above it, governing throttle response, active exhaust valves, the cooling fan strategy, the electric water pumps, and the electronic torque limiters. On the latest turbocharged Porsche engines, this supervisory layer is aggressive enough that even a professional remap of the engine control unit will deliver zero additional output, unless the supervisor is also reprogrammed. That reprogramming requires factory-level access that is simply not available outside the authorized network. Owners who attempt workarounds through aftermarket coding tools frequently discover that their changes trigger compatibility flags across unrelated modules. The car enters a reduced performance mode, throws warning lights, and sometimes refuses to restart after being switched off. The supervisor is not just watching the engine, it is watching you. Because the supervisor is a sealed component from the owner's perspective, the only path to a full remap is through a specialist who has invested in the authorized platform. That single barrier has turned the premium tuning world for modern Porsches into a tightly held niche, with labor rates to match. And what the supervisor does not catch, the cloud does. Number 11. Over-the-air updates can wipe your work while you sleep. Porsche now pushes software updates to connected vehicles remotely, the same way your phone receives overnight patches. These updates can recalibrate sensors, change how driver assistance systems behave, reset configurations, and in some cases reverse any aftermarket coding applied to the car. Owners on enthusiast forums reported that a single major software campaign left their instrument cluster rebooting repeatedly because the update reached some modules but not others. Others described service visits running well over 6 hours, just to apply a cumulative software package at the dealership. The underlying issue is that a modern Porsche does not have a single unified software version the way a Tesla does. Each electronic control unit can be on its own update cycle. A partial update leaves different modules speaking slightly different software dialects, and the symptoms that follow can look like every kind of hardware failure at once. The owner then pays for diagnostic time at the dealer to identify whether the fault is mechanical, electrical, or simply the result of an incomplete software campaign that needs to be reapplied. You are not the only one with access to the operating system. Number 10. Even the 12-volt battery is now a programmed component. Replacing the battery on a modern Porsche is no longer a question of disconnecting the old one and bolting in a new one. The vehicle needs to be informed that a fresh battery is installed through a process called battery registration. This procedure updates the charging algorithm so the alternator stops compensating for a degraded cell and adjusts to a new one. Skip this step and the alternator continues to push the same current it was pushing to rescue the old battery. The new battery ends up chronically overcharged, the start-stop system begins misbehaving, and electrical faults spread across unrelated systems. Battery registration requires diagnostic access to the energy management module. A generic code reader cannot send that command. What used to be a 15-minute job at any auto parts counter now requires either a trip to a specialist or an investment in authorized software. And on the hybrid Panamera and Cayenne models, the high-voltage battery pack adds an entirely separate layer of complexity that is legally off-limits to anyone without specialized training and protective equipment. The fully electric Taycan takes this one step further, with a battery management architecture so tightly integrated into the vehicle safety systems that even routine service must be performed by a certified high-voltage technician working within a clearly defined procedural environment, and the windshield above that battery has become just as complicated. Number 9. Windshield replacement now requires a calibration lab. Modern Porsches carry cameras and radar sensors tucked behind the windshield that power lane assistance, adaptive cruise control, and automatic emergency braking systems. Every one of these sensors is calibrated to the exact optical properties of the original glass. The moment that glass is replaced, even with a correctly specified factory part, the sensor array must be fully recalibrated before the driver assistance systems will operate correctly. There are two types of calibration, and most current Porsches require both. Static calibration needs a dedicated target board placed at precisely measured distances in front of the vehicle, inside a climate-controlled facility with specific lighting conditions. Dynamic calibration then requires driving the car at a defined speed along clearly marked roads so the software can relearn lane geometry. The equipment for static calibration alone runs into several €1,000s for a properly certified shop, and the entire procedure must be performed on a perfectly level surface with exact measurements. A small chip in the glass is no longer a mobile repair. It is a half-day appointment that can push past a 4-figure invoice. The recalibration procedure alone can occupy a dedicated bay for several hours, and any deviation from the specified conditions invalidates the result. You cannot do this in your garage. Number 8. The headlights now come with their own authentication protocol. On recent Porsche models, including the Matrix LED and HD Matrix units fitted to the 992 Generation 911 and the latest Panamera, a replacement headlight unit is not a simple bolt-in component. The assembly carries a unique digital identifier that must be coded to the vehicle during installation. Without that coding, the headlight may refuse to illuminate correctly, enter a limited function fault state, or propagate errors across the entire lighting network. Dealers have invested in dedicated scanning equipment specifically for this procedure, and independent specialists have reported that using unauthorized coding tools on these assemblies can trigger deeper faults in the light control module, faults that then require an authorized session to resolve. The assembly itself on certain Porsche models runs into 4-figure territory before labor, and the coding fee is a separate line item on the invoice. Even a used unit pulled from a donor vehicle is effectively useless without authorized recoding, because the digital identifier remains linked to the original vehicle in the manufacturer records. The headlight industry has quietly become one of the most profitable single-component categories for the authorized repair network. A stone chip in the lens is no longer a simple replacement. It is a software event. Number 7. The air suspension speaks a proprietary dialect only the dealer understands. Porsche models fitted with the adaptive air suspension system, including the Cayenne, the Panamera, and the optional setup on the 911, rely on electronic compressors, ride height sensors, and computer-controlled dampers that constantly adjust the vehicle's posture. When any component in this system is replaced, whether it is a leaking air strut, a failed compressor, or a damaged ride height sensor, the system must be reinitialized through authorized diagnostic software before it will function correctly. Without proper calibration, the vehicle can sit at the wrong ride height, throw persistent suspension faults, or drop into a limp mode that severely limits road speed. The individual components are not expensive to begin with. A replacement compressor can exceed €1,000 before labor. An individual air strut can climb past €2,000 per corner on the Cayenne. After spending that money on parts, the owner still needs authorized software access to make the new hardware function. The math simply does not work for the home mechanic. On the latest Panamera and Cayenne platforms, the suspension system also ties into the active roll control and the rear axle steering on certain trims, which means a single calibration mistake can propagate into handling behavior the driver will feel on the first corner. And the key in your pocket is locked behind the same wall. If you enjoy this video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Number 6. The key has become an encrypted identity document. Losing a Porsche key used to be a routine locksmith job. Today, a replacement key for a current generation Porsche requires full security authorization through the manufacturer's online systems, which verify the vehicle identification number, confirm registered ownership, and generate the encrypted pairing codes needed to marry the new key to the immobilizer. A replacement key from the dealer alone carries a retail price that can run into several €100, and that figure does not include the programming fee, which is charged as a separate labor item. Independent locksmiths who want to cut a replacement key for a modern Porsche must go through a formal registration process with the manufacturer, submit documentation proving the legitimacy of the request, and wait for the vehicle to be cleared in the authorized database. Forum posts from professional technicians describe the procedure as slow, uneven, and occasionally obstructive, with vehicle identification numbers remaining locked even after every step has been followed correctly. The key in your pocket is no longer a piece of metal, it is a credential. Number 5. Even the brakes have gone fully electronic. Many current Porsches are fitted with electronic parking brakes, and the brake-by-wire systems on the fully electric Taycan take the same principle even further. Replacing the rear brake pads on a Porsche with an electronic parking brake is no longer a straightforward mechanical job. The system must first be put into service mode through authorized software so the caliper pistons retract far enough to accept new pads. Without that step, the pistons physically cannot be pushed back. After the new pads are fitted, the system must then be recalibrated so it knows the correct starting thickness and applies the parking brake with the appropriate clamping force. Skip the calibration and one of two things happens. The parking brake either fails to hold the vehicle on a gradient, or it clamps so aggressively that the pads drag and overheat during normal driving. On the Taycan, the situation is even more sensitive because the regenerative braking system also depends on this calibration being correct. An incorrectly set friction brake baseline confuses the regenerative strategy. The vehicle starts decelerating unpredictably under pedal input, and the driver ends up with an unsafe braking feel that feedback loops back into further software faults. Brake pads used to be one of the most common entry-level repairs in the entire automotive world. Porsche has made even that a software event. Number 4. The air conditioning now requires federal certification to touch. Newer Porsche models, along with almost every other manufacturer that sells into modern emissions markets, use a refrigerant called R11234F instead of the older R134A. This refrigerant is classified as mildly flammable, and the authorized recovery and recharge equipment carries certification requirements that rule out most garage-scale setups. A compatible recovery machine can cost an independent shop well into the 4-figure range, and the refrigerant itself costs several times more per gram than the older formulation. The procedure is also far more exacting. The system must be pulled down to a specified vacuum level before any refrigerant enters the circuit, and the final charge must be measured down to the gram. Overcharge the system even slightly, and the compressor can suffer damage that quickly becomes a catastrophic failure. Underfill it, and the cabin cooling never performs correctly. On the hybrid Panamera and Cayenne, the climate system is also tied into the battery thermal management circuit, which means a refrigerant fault can cascade into the high-voltage side of the vehicle. A leak in what used to be a simple cabin cooling loop can now compromise the thermal regulation of the traction battery, turn a routine summer repair into a major service event, and in the worst cases put the owner in front of a repair estimate that runs into 5 figures. The era of buying a can of refrigerant and topping up the system in the driveway is over. Number 3. Subscription-gated features mean the hardware is already yours. The functionality is not. Porsche has followed the broader luxury industry into a business model where certain vehicle features are physically installed at the factory but only activated through paid subscriptions in the digital storefront. Functionality such as enhanced driver assistance packages, certain infotainment features, and performance data logging on selected models is present in the hardware from the moment the vehicle rolls off the production line. The owner has already paid for the processors, the cameras, and the sensors. The functionality is separately metered. Any attempt to activate these locked features through unauthorized coding tools invites the same cloud-based enforcement described earlier. The next over-the-air update can detect the unauthorized activation and revert the configuration, sometimes along with additional fault codes that require a dealer session to clear. The hardware is in the garage, the authorization sits on a Porsche server, and the model is spreading. Every new Porsche platform carries more capacity than it is sold with, because the manufacturer has learned that recurring revenue from a vehicle already in a customer's possession is dramatically more profitable than a single transaction at the showroom. This is what ownership looks like when the vehicle is designed as a platform. Number 2. The repair information is paywalled and deliberately fragmented. Even for the owner who somehow acquires the correct tools and the technical skill, finding the actual repair procedures for a modern Porsche is its own challenge. The factory workshop information system, which contains the wiring diagrams, torque specifications, service bulletins, and guided diagnostic procedures, is accessible only through a paid subscription on Porsche's technical information portal. A short duration pass exists for smaller jobs, but annual access runs into the thousands of euros, and the structured guided diagnostics that the factory tool provides are simply not replicable from aftermarket sources. Unlike Toyota or Honda, where independent repair databases cover most procedures in reasonable detail, Porsche information in third-party systems is frequently incomplete, outdated, or missing entirely. Professional technicians on independent forums describe the aftermarket documentation as scattered and inconsistent compared to what flows through the authorized network. For the home mechanic working without any professional database subscription, the only available resources are forum posts and video tutorials that may or may not apply to a specific model year and engine combination. The time cost of searching for a procedure that may not even exist in open sources frequently exceeds the time cost of the repair itself, and one misinterpreted step on a modern Porsche can cascade into a repair bill that dwarfs any savings the owner hoped to capture by doing the work themselves. Number 1. The car is engineered to bring you back to the dealer. That is the business model. Every locked control unit, every proprietary protocol, every over-the-air update, every subscription-gated feature, every authenticated replacement part, and every component that requires software initialization after installation serves a single commercial purpose. It keeps the entire repair ecosystem inside the authorized Porsche network. The right to repair legislation that has begun to emerge in certain markets technically protects the owner's ability to service the vehicle outside that network. The practical reality in the workshop looks different. Even the best equipped independent Porsche specialists now spend tens of thousands of euros a year simply to keep pace with what the manufacturer changes between model years. For the owner working in a home garage on a weekend, the gap between what is possible and what the car demands has become a canyon. Certain jobs remain accessible. Oil changes on most models are still straightforward. Cabin filters, wiper blades, and a handful of routine service items remain within reach. Beyond that short list, the tasks that require authorized software, a calibration rig, a subscription, or a security clearance grow longer with every new Porsche that leaves the factory. The era of the do-it-yourself Porsche owner is not ending because enthusiasts lost interest. It is ending because the vehicles themselves have been designed to lock the door. If you want to see what owning a modern Porsche actually costs over the long term and which mistakes make those costs far worse, there is a full breakdown waiting for you next. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next one.